Hey guys, welcome back to the Vanished Lands. They say the ocean hides more than it reveals. Beneath its restless waves lie secrets older than memory, shadows that appear on maps yet vanish from the world. Among them is one of the most haunting mysteries ever drawn in ink, an island that sailors swore they saw, that cartographers sketched with care, and yet no one can find today. An island called Frisland. For centuries, it drifted between truth and myth. Ships vanished in its fog, voices echoed across its waters, and maps carried its outline as though the land itself demanded to be remembered. But Frisland was never just an island. It was a curse, a place that stole not only lives, but memories, a phantom that haunted dreams, rewrote history, and waited patiently for those bold or foolish enough to seek it. Tonight, you will hear its story, a story of explorers who vanished without a trace, of maps that bled secrets, of scholars driven to madness by whispers in the night, a story of destiny and danger, where the price of knowing is higher than any treasure at sea. So listen carefully and do not look away. For once you hear the tale of Frisland, the phantom land of the North Atlantic, it may never let you go. For centuries, maps were trusted more than memory, and the great cartographers of Europe carried the power to shape the world. A line of ink across parchment could send ships into storms, lead men to treasure, or erase entire nations from history. But there was one island that refused to stay hidden, an island that appeared again and again on the maps of kings, merchants, and sailors. It was called Frisland, a land of mountains and villages, harbors and ports, drawn with detail so convincing that no navigator dared question it. For generations, it was accepted as fact. Yet today, no trace of Frisland can be found. How could a place once so widely known, so frequently documented, simply vanish? Was Frisland a real island swallowed by the sea, a cartographer's trick, or something far stranger, an island that never belonged to our world at all? The mystery begins in the 16th century, when the North Atlantic was still a stage of shadows and unknowns. Men sailed westward in search of wealth, discovery, and dominion. Yet most coastlines remained uncharted, and the sea itself seemed alive, hiding its secrets beneath fog and storm. Among these secrets lay Frisland, drawn boldly between Iceland and Greenland, far enough to be unreachable by accident, close enough to tempt explorers with its promise of new land. Maps from Venice, Antwerp, and London all showed Frisland, not as a vague rumor or a dotted line, but with harbors named, rivers sketched, and villages clearly marked. This was no idle mistake. Whoever first charted Frisland had claimed to know its shores intimately, as if they had walked upon its beaches and spoken with its people. Sailors studying these maps prepared themselves for the sight of its mountains rising from the sea, for the safety of its ports, for the welcome of its settlements. Frisland, in those years, was as real as France or Spain. But the sea has always punished certainty. The first accounts tell of Venetian explorers who claimed to anchor at Frisland during their voyages north. Their logs describe a green and fertile island, its valleys rich with game, its villages lit by smoke from hearths. Some wrote of harbors where the locals traded fish, wool, and even silver. These tales traveled fast, spreading from court to court, feeding the appetites of monarchs who saw Frisland as a stepping stone to the riches of the New World. But others whispered that the island was not so welcoming. Several ships vanished while attempting to land, swallowed by sudden storms. Survivors spoke of strange lights flickering across the cliffs, voices calling from unseen places, and shadows moving in the fog. A Portuguese captain wrote of black stones rising from the sea like towers, and swore his men heard bells tolling beneath the water. When they reached shore, the island seemed deserted. Yet in the night, campfires burned in the hills, and their watchmen vanished without a sound. What kind of place could appear both inhabited and empty, both safe and cursed? The sailors disagreed, but the cartographers did not. They inked Frisland onto parchment, giving it shape and permanence. Once fixed to a map, the island became truth, and truth, once accepted, is difficult to erase. By the 17th century, Frisland appeared on nearly every major European chart. Dutch atlases painted it with mountains running down its spine. English maps dotted it with villages that bore strange, half-familiar names. To look at these maps, One would believe Frisland was larger than Ireland, a kingdom waiting to be claimed. For explorers, it was a prize. For kings, it was potential conquest. And for those who believe in omens, it was a mystery too heavy to ignore. Yet the more ships that searched for Frisland, the less certain its existence became. Some expeditions reported anchoring on its shores, though they returned with no riches, only stories of barren hills and hostile weather. Others sailed through its supposed coordinates and found nothing but waves. Still, the maps kept showing it, as if the island had a will of its own. It is easy to dismiss these contradictions as error, but sailors were not men given to fantasy. Their lives depended on accuracy. To chart an island that did not exist was to invite disaster, yet disaster came anyway. Logbooks describe storms rising without warning near Frisland's supposed location. Compasses spun wildly. The sea itself grew restless, as if refusing entry. A chilling pattern emerged. Those who swore Frisland was real often met strange ends. A Venetian merchant who claimed to have traded their drown mysteriously in calm waters. A French navigator who insisted he had spent 3 nights in one of its villages vanished after setting sail again. His ship never found. A Scottish cartographer who published the first map without Frisland was accused of heresy, stripped of his title, and died in poverty. It was as if the island punished both belief and denial, allowing no escape from its shadow. By now, Frisland had become more than a place. It was a legend. Some whispered it was a fragment of Atlantis, rising and sinking with the tides of time. Others said it was a wandering land of the dead, a kingdom between worlds where lost souls gathered. A few even suggested Frisland was alive, not stone and soil, but a being disguised as land, luring sailors for reasons beyond human comprehension. These theories may sound fantastical, yet they mattered less than the ink on the page, because Frisland endured in maps long after doubt crept in, guiding ships into peril. Each expedition that set course for its harbors was a gamble, each captain forced to choose between the certainty of tradition and the uncertainty of the sea. The 17th century brought a turning point. A fleet of English vessels, equipped with the latest charts, sailed north in search of Frisland. For weeks they battled fog and icy winds, until one morning, dark land rose before them. Mountains pierced the sky, valleys stretched into shadow. They anchored offshore, preparing to claim this phantom island at last. Yet the land proved deceptive. No smoke rose from villages, no paths cut through the hills. Scouts reported the ground shifting under their feet, as if the island itself resisted their presence. At night, voices echoed across the waves, though no one could find their source. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, Frisland was gone. By morning, the ships saw only empty horizon, the island swallowed whole by the sea. When the fleet returned to England, they were ridiculed. How could mountains vanish? How could valleys dissolve into mist? Yet their testimonies were recorded, and once again the island appeared in ink, stubbornly alive on parchment, even when the sea denied it. By the 18th century, Frisland's reputation began to unravel. More accurate surveys of the North Atlantic failed to locate it. As scientific rigor grew, belief in phantom islands diminished. Slowly, cartographers began erasing Frisland from their maps, replacing it with empty ocean. But the ghost lingered. Old charts circulated in taverns and libraries, whispering of a land that should not exist but once did. Even now, the mystery endures. Was Frisland a colossal error, repeated by mapmakers too proud to admit mistake? Or was it something stranger, an island that revealed itself only under certain stars, to certain eyes, in certain centuries? Could have been a land out of time, drifting between our world and another, or a mirage conjured by the sea itself. To lure men into its depths, the truth may never be known. But one fact remains undeniable. For more than 200 years, the world believed in Frisland, not as a rumor, but as a certainty, an island inked with precision, described with detail, sought with hope and fear alike. And then nothing, no trace, no ruins, no shores to touch. Imagine the frustration of those sailors who searched for it, the terror of those who swore they found it, and the confusion of those who saw it vanish before their eyes. An island both present and absent, memory and myth, real and unreal. Frisland became a mirror, reflecting humanity's hunger for discovery and its fear of the unknown. Perhaps the greater mystery is not the island itself, but the persistence of belief. Why did men cling to Frisland for centuries? Even when evidence failed them, was it desperation for land in a vast and hostile ocean? Or was it because some part of them knew deep down that Frisland was real, but not in a way our world could contain? The maps remain as evidence. Turn the pages of old atlases, and you will see it. Frisland, bold and undeniable, surrounded by the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Its villages marked, its ports ready to receive ships that never came home. An island that has no right to exist, yet does, if only in ink and memory. And so the question lingers, a shadow cast across the centuries. Was Frisland ever truly there? Or was it always something else? Something stranger, waiting in the fog? The tale does not end here. For what happened to those who swore they set foot on Frisland is far more unsettling. Some return with haunted eyes, speaking of places that could not be mapped, of cities frozen in time, of people who did not belong to this earth. Others never return at all. Their fate and the secrets they carried remain hidden in the restless waves of the North Atlantic. And when the next explorers went searching, they found nothing. The sea was empty. Frisland was gone. The ocean keeps secrets better than the earth. A city swallowed by sand may one day be uncovered. A temple hidden in the jungle can be reclaimed. But when the sea takes something, it does not return it willingly. Sailors have long known this, and perhaps that is why their stories carry a weight heavier than chronicles and more terrifying than prophecy. For when sailors speak, they speak not of legends dreamed in firelight, but of things witnessed at the edge of survival, in places where the horizon swallows the world and the line between reality and imagination thins to nothing. It was in such places, far north in the restless waters of the Atlantic, that whispers of Frisland began to haunt every voyage. Men returned from the sea not with riches, but with memories that would not leave them. They spoke of lights glowing upon horizons where no land should be, of voices carried on the wind across empty waters, of laughter that echoed when there was no ship to answer. And always, these tales pointed toward the place where maps insisted an island should be, though none could say for certain if the island itself existed or if it was the sea playing tricks on desperate eyes. From Venice to London, from Lisbon to Amsterdam, maps kept drawing Frisland. Not once, not by accident, but again and again across centuries, as the island demanded to be remembered. The strangest part was not its presence on these maps, but the detail with which it appeared. Villages with names, harbors with depth, mountains etched with care. Who could have invented such certainty? And why would the same certainty echo from hand to hand across the continent? The skeptics claimed it was nothing but a cartographer's mistake, an error copied blindly from one parchment to another, until even the wisest men accepted the fiction. Yet sailors knew better. Too many nights had they seen unnatural fire dancing on the waters. Too many times had they heard voices calling out in languages that belonged neither to Europe nor to any known tongue. It was not madness, but the same visions appeared to different men on different nights, men hardened by storms and salt. Men who knew the tricks of the sea, yet swore this was something else. Some described ghostly lights that shone like lanterns of ships, but when they drew near, no hull or mast could be seen. Others told of bells tolling beneath the waves, as if an entire cathedral lay sunken but alive beneath the depths. A few swore they had glimpsed the outline of dark land in the fog, a silhouette of cliffs against the sky, only for it to vanish as dawn approached. These were not drunken ramblings. They were testimonies etched in logbooks, sworn before captains, carried into port like cargo no one wished claim. The whispers of Frisland became so widespread that they infected even those who never sailed. Merchants in London spoke of the island as if it were a rival market. Venetian scholars debated its resources as if they had read treaties signed on its soil. In Amsterdam, entire guilds prepared expeditions to stake claims upon its harbors. Yet the closer men came to certainty, the further Frisland seemed to drift. It was as though the island existed not on the sea, but in the minds of those who sought it, surfacing only to those whom it chose. And here lies the most unsettling question. What if Frisland was not an invention at all? What if it revealed itself only when it wished, to sailors it deemed worthy or to men already doomed? Perhaps the maps were not lies but echoes, attempts to trap in ink something that lived beyond human reach. Each cartographer may have thought he copied another's work, yet in truth, perhaps each one recorded a vision whispered to him in dreams, or a memory not his own, but forced upon him by something waiting in the Atlantic fog. The testimonies grew darker as the years passed. One sailor, an old man with weathered hands, told of hearing children singing across the waves though no land was near. The song was sweet at first, but as he listened, the words turned to sorrow and then to madness. He tried to cover his ears, yet the song entered through his bones, a melody that followed him long after he returned to shore. He died months later, screaming at night that the sea wanted him back. Another crew returned half mad, swearing that their ship had sailed into a storm of voices. The wind did not howl as wind should, but spoke in clear words, pleading for them to turn away. They obeyed at first, but curiosity overcame fear, and when they pressed on, 3 men fell dead without cause, their faces twisted in terror. The captain swore never again to sail north, yet he could not keep his eyes from the horizon, as though something called to him still. Again and again, maps repeated the shape of Frisland, but the island itself remained elusive. Was this persistence a mistake of pride? Cartographers unwilling to admit their error? Or was it the work of something stranger, the island itself forcing its image into their minds, commanding to be drawn again and again so it would never be forgotten? If so, then Frisland was not only a place of land and stone, but a memory, a parasite feeding on the imagination of men, ensuring that it could not die as long as ink existed to preserve its form. This is where the story turns from mystery into dread. For among the countless tales of lights and voices, there is one testimony that stands apart. It is the story of a navigator whose name has been half erased by time, though fragments remain in diaries and letters. He was no common sailor, but man of skill, respected for his charts, trusted by kings. When he swore that he had spent 3 nights upon Frisland, the world listened. He claimed that the island did not appear suddenly, but slowly, like a shadow condensing from mist. At first it was nothing but a smudge on the horizon, then cliffs, then valleys. He anchored his ship in a sheltered bay and set foot upon its shore. What he found was neither paradise nor wasteland, but something in between, a place that seemed familiar and alien all at once. The villagers stood silent, their houses built of stone, their doors closed, yet smoke rose from chimneys. He saw pathways trodden, but no people to walk them. Fields were plowed, but no farmers worked the soil. It was a land alive with absence, a place that existed without those who should inhabit it. On the first night, he and his men heard voices in the distance, like the murmur of a market square. They followed the sound, but it led only to empty streets, where shadows shifted without light. On the second night, they saw figures moving on the hills, tall and silent, watching but never approaching. The men grew restless, afraid to sleep, for dreams came too easily here. Dreams so vivid that they awoke unsure whether they had lived another life during the hours of rest. By the third night, the navigator himself felt the island pressing upon him, as though it sought to draw something out of his mind. He could not explain it, but he knew he could not stay. He ordered his men back to the ship, and they sailed at dawn. He returned not with gold, not with maps, but with something worse, a presence that followed him. His journals grew erratic, filled with sketches of faces no one else could see, diagrams of symbols he swore were carved into the cliffs of Frisland. He avoided sleep, muttering that dreams belonged to the island. His colleague described him as hollow-eyed, speaking often to people who were not there. Within a year, he was dead, though some claimed death was too simple a word for what befell him. His body wasted, but his eyes remained open, staring as though still watching the horizon where Frisland waited. What curse had he brought back? Was it madness born of fear, or something carried from the island itself? A fragment of its reality lodged inside him? His maps remained unfinished, yet in their margins, one phrase repeated over and over: it remembers. This tale, more than any other, sealed Frisland's place in legend. For if one man had walked its shores and returned cursed, then perhaps the island was not an error but a predator, revealing itself to lure men in, feeding not on their bodies but on their minds, ensuring that even in death, they serve its memory. The maps, the testimonies, the voices across the sea, They may not have been mistakes at all. They may have been the whispers of Frisland itself, ensuring that century after century, its name was spoken, its outline preserved. And if that is true, then perhaps the island never vanished at all. Perhaps it waits still, not in geography but in thought, watching for the next navigator bold or foolish enough to listen to the whispers across the sea. For one man swore he had seen it, had walked it, had breathed its air, and though he brought no treasure, he brought something more dangerous. He brought a curse that did not die with him, a curse that lingers still in every old map where Frisland shape is drawn, a curse that ensures the island is never forgotten. And so the story does not end, for if an island can demand remembrance, then what else can demand? And who among us will be the next to hear its call? The sea remembers what men forget. Empires may rise and fall, maps may be redrawn, but the ocean keeps its secrets. It whispers of them in the crash of waves, hides them beneath its endless surface, and when it chooses, reveals them only in fragments. The story of Frisland had already haunted Europe for decades, etched into charts, whispered in taverns, debated in the chambers of kings. But nothing etched it deeper into legend than the disappearance of an entire fleet of ships, men swallowed not by storms or enemies, but by something far stranger. It was a vanished expedition, a journey meant to prove once and for all the truth of Frisland, and instead, it became its darkest mystery. The year was the early 17th century, when the seas north of Europe were still vast frontiers. By then, Frisland had become a certainty on paper. From Venice to London, Amsterdam to Paris, maps showed it proudly, an island large enough to rival Ireland, a stepping stone between Greenland and Iceland, a prize for whichever nation reached it first. The age of empires demanded new land, and Frisland promised exactly that. To ignore it was to forfeit opportunity. And so, a fleet was assembled. Records suggest it was not one ship, but several, perhaps 3, perhaps 5. The accounts differ, blurred by time and rumor. Yet all agree the fleet was guided by the most trusted maps of its day. Captains were chosen not for reckless bravery, but for experience. Men who had faced storms and ice, who had mapped coasts with precision. Their mission was clear: sail directly to Frisland, claim its harbors, chart its resources, and return with proof undeniable. The departure was marked with ceremony. Crowds lined the docks, watching as sails unfurled, their white canvas catching the wind like wings. Priests blessed the voyage, merchants placed their fortunes on the gamble, and kings awaited news of a land that might extend their reach across the seas. The expedition carried food, tools, seeds, and stone markers, prepared not only to visit Frisland, but to build upon it, to make it theirs. Days turned to weeks as the fleet sailed into colder waters. The ocean stretched endless, a horizon of steel and cloud. Then came the fog, not ordinary fog that lifted with the sun, but a wall of shifting gray, dense and impenetrable. The fleet pressed on, compasses twitching, maps consulted by lantern light. Somewhere beyond that curtain of mist, Frisland was waiting. The men believed it, the maps demanded it, but the sea gave nothing back. The first sign that something was wrong came when signals between the ships grew faint. Lanterns blinked in the night, but the fog swallowed their light. Drums and horns echoed strangely, as if the sound returned from directions it was never sent. Sailors called across the waves and swore they heard voices answering. Not their fellow men, but strangers speaking words no one recognized. Some claimed to hear laughter, others weeping. The fleet pressed forward, but unease spread like infection. Then, silence. Weeks passed and no word returned. The ports waited for sails on the horizon, but none appeared. Families prayed, merchants despaired, kings demanded answers. At first, hope lingered. Perhaps storms delayed them. Perhaps ice forced them to winter elsewhere. But as months turned to years, the truth became undeniable. The fleet had vanished. No wreckage drifted ashore. No survivors stumbled back. It was as though the sea had swallowed them whole. Theories spread quickly. Some said storms had shattered them against unseen rocks. Others accused rival nations of ambush and secrecy. Yet no evidence surfaced. No rival claimed victory. The ocean kept its silence. And so the darker question grew. Had Frisland itself taken them? Those who believed in the island whispered that it had revealed itself to the expedition, drawing them into its harbors. Perhaps they had landed, walked its shores, seen its towers and valleys. Perhaps they had found not gold or farmland, but something else, something that bound them there forever, an island that gave welcome only once, never to release those it claimed. Years later, when memory had begun to fade, a fragment surfaced. On a lonely shore, a battered logbook was found, pages water damaged, ink smeared, yet words still legible in places. Its origin was never certain. Some swore it belonged to one of the missing captains. Others said it was merely a sailor's private journal, but its entries were enough to reignite the terror. The logbook told of fog that never lifted, of days where the sun did not rise, only a dim gray sky that pressed low upon the sea. It described strange lights drifting in the mist, lights that moved against the wind, lights that seemed to follow the ships. The crew grew restless, mutiny whispered, but the captain pressed on, guided by glimpses of land that appeared then vanished. The final entries grew frantic, scrawled in uneven hand. They spoke of land rising from the fog, cliffs black as coal, towers that pierced the sky though no stone should stand so tall. The last line, the one that has haunted every telling since, read only this: black towers rising from the fog. Then the words ended. No signature, no farewell, only silence. What were these black towers? Were they cliffs mistaken for structures, or something built by hands unknown? Were they illusions of the sea, or remnants of a civilization erased from time? Or were they something else entirely? Something alive, watching the ships approach? The logbook offered no answers, only questions. Yet its existence was enough to turn rumor into legend. For if the logbook was real, then the fleet had indeed reached something. Not open water, not empty horizon, but land. Land with towers dark and unnatural. And if that was true, then Frisland was not a lie, but a secret the sea refused to surrender. Still, skeptics dismissed the logbook as forgery, a tale invented to thrill or terrify. Yet the absence of wreckage, the total vanishing of men and ships, remained unexplained. The ocean rarely leaves no trace. Even storms return fragments of their destruction. Even enemies leave blood behind. But here, there was nothing. An entire fleet erased, as if it had never existed, except for the whispers of its log. For the families left behind, the vanished expedition was tragedy. For the kings who funded it, it was humiliation. But for the sailors who still brave the northern seas, it was warning. They spoke of the fleet in hushed tones, of how Frisland had taken them. Maps still marked the island, but fewer men sought it now. The memory of the expedition lingered like a curse, reminding all who sailed north that the sea kept more than fish beneath its waves. And so Frisland grew darker in legend. No longer was it seen as a paradise waiting to be claimed. Instead, it became a place of dread, a land that demanded sacrifice, an island that erased those who reached for it. Some said it was never land at all, but a mirage conjured by forces older than mankind. Others claimed it was real but existed only at certain times, opening like a door and then closing again, trapping those who stepped through. The truth lies somewhere beyond reach, hidden in the gray Atlantic fog. Yet the logbook remains, its last words echoing across centuries. Black towers rising from the fog. Were they ruins of an ancient kingdom drowned by the sea? Or monuments of something not human? Guardians of a place not meant for mortal eyes? Whatever they were, they stand still in memory, casting shadows not upon the ocean, but upon the minds of those who dare imagine them. And the sea remembers. It remembers the fleet that vanished, the men who never returned, the families who waited in vain. It remembers the silence that followed, and the questions that remain unanswered. Did the sea swallow them, or did Frisland take them? The maps still whisper the island. The stories still breathe in old taverns. And somewhere in the endless horizon of the North Atlantic, the fog drifts heavy, hiding what lies within. Perhaps even now, the black towers rise unseen, waiting for another fleet, another expedition, another sacrifice. The ocean has always been larger than human imagination, but it was the mapmakers who tried to tame it. With ink and parchment, They gave shape to the unknown, turning chaos into order, fear into knowledge. Yet what happens when the very instruments of truth become infected by something unseen? When maps, the guardians of certainty, become riddled with lies that feel more real than the truth? That was the puzzle of Frisland, and in Renaissance Europe, it became an obsession. By the late 16th century, scholars and explorers alike noticed something strange. Frisland did not simply appear on a few scattered maps. It appeared everywhere. Atlases from Venice, London, Antwerp, and Amsterdam all carried it. Yet none agreed on its exact form. On one chart it sprawled long and narrow, like a sleeping beast. On another, it appeared as a wide block of land with dozens of villages. Still another painted it with jagged mountains down its spine, forests crawling with life, rivers flowing like veins. It was as if each cartographer had walked the same island, yet described it differently, shaped not by land but by dream. The deeper scholars dug, the stranger became. Some maps gave Frisland ports with names never heard elsewhere. Others placed fortresses upon its cliffs, as though kingdoms had once ruled there. Yet when compared side by side, the details contradicted each other. Villages shifted like chess pieces. Mountains rose and fell. Entire coastlines changed. No two depictions were alike, and yet every map insisted the island existed. This contradiction puzzled the careful minds of Renaissance Europe. Cartographers prided themselves on accuracy. A misplaced coastline could cost lives. A false harbor could doom ships to wreck. They were not men given to whimsy. If Frisland were an error, it should have been corrected quickly, erased by better observation. But it was not. Instead, it multiplied, its shape shifting, but its presence constant, as if some hidden hand guided it into every chart. Suspicion spread like ink across parchment. Was there a secret society of mapmakers, bound by oath to protect a forbidden truth? Were the contradictions not mistakes, but deliberate obfuscations? Each cartographer hiding pieces of a puzzle too dangerous to reveal fully? Such questions were whispered in scholarly circles, yet rarely written. To accuse the guild of conspiracy was to risk ruin, and already, strange stories surrounded those who challenged Frisland's existence. The first man to openly doubt it was a Dutch scholar who published a treatise declaring Frisland a phantom. He argued that sailors had mistaken Greenland or Iceland for something else, that cartographers had copied each other's errors out of laziness. His reasoning was sound, his evidence meticulous. Yet within a year, he was disgraced. His patrons withdrew support, his manuscripts were burned, and he died penniless. Some said his peers turned against him out of envy. Others whispered that he had been punished by forces beyond academia, forces that protected Frisland from erasure. He was not the only one. In London, a cartographer who attempted to redraw the North Atlantic without Frisland fell ill soon after publishing. His hand withered, twisted as though struck by palsy, leaving him unable to draw again. In Paris, a scholar who mocked Frisland during a lecture was found raving in the streets weeks later, crying that an island walked in his dreams. Again and again, those who tried to erase Frisland met with misfortune, as if the island itself punished denial. It was not merely superstition. Letters survive, filled with the anxieties of learned men who confessed to fearing Frisland, not as myth, but as presence. Some admitted they had seen it in dreams, always different, yet always the same: black cliffs, distant fires, towers veiled in fog. They swore these visions came unbidden, as though the island invaded their minds. And each time, they woke with the urge to draw it, to mark its shape upon parchment. The details never matched, yet the compulsion was irresistible. What if Frisland was not simply an island misplaced, but something deeper, an idea that infected minds, a phantom geography that demanded existence? Could it be that the cartographers were not inventing Frisland, but recording something whispered to them from beyond the veil of the world? The Renaissance was an age of hidden societies and secret knowledge. Alchemists pursued eternal life. Philosophers sought codes and sacred texts, and mapmakers were no different. Behind their careful measurements and instruments lay a world of suspicion, rivalry, and whispers of forbidden charts. Some believed Frisland was guarded not by sailors or soldiers, but by men who held pens instead of swords, that a brotherhood of cartographers ensured its survival, each one entrusted with fragments of its truth, none daring to erase it for fear of the consequences. But if such a brotherhood existed, they were silent. Their only trace was the maps themselves, artifacts that grew more unnerving with every comparison. For how could so many disagree in detail, yet agree in conviction? Was Frisland perhaps not a single island, but a shifting one, changing its form each time it revealed itself? Could that explain the contradictions? That the island itself refused to stay still, morphing in the memory of those who beheld it? As this puzzle deepened, so too did the fear surrounding it. Scholars began to avoid direct mention, referring to Frisland obliquely as the place that should not be, yet still it remained stubbornly alive in ink, as if the island needed only belief to exist. And then came the Venetian. He was among the most respected mapmakers of his age, known for his precision, his refusal to embellish, his devotion to truth above tradition. For years he included Frisland in his atlases like all others, until one day, without warning, he erased it. His latest map of the North Atlantic showed only blank sea where the phantom island had once stood. No ports, no villages, no cliffs, only the restless waves. The reaction was immediate. Some praised his courage, calling it a long overdue correction. Others condemned him, accusing him of arrogance, of defying centuries of accumulated knowledge. But the Venetian did not waver. He declared that Frisland did not exist, that it was a contagion of error, a dream mistaken for fact. He had seen the truth, and the truth was emptiness. And then he vanished. No one saw him leave his workshop. No ship recorded his passage. His belongings remained untouched, his tools of navigation neatly arranged, his unfinished manuscripts waiting. Yet he was gone. Some said he fled, fearing the backlash of his peers. Others whispered he had been silenced, not by men but by the very island he had denied. For in the weeks before his disappearance, neighbors swore they heard him speaking at night, not to family, not to friends, but of voices that answered from the empty air. His final notes, found among his papers, contained no maps, no measurements, only one chilling sentence scrawled again and again in uneven hand. The sea does not forgive. His disappearance sealed Frisland's legend tighter than any chart could. For now, belief was not a matter of error or correction. It was a matter of survival. To deny Frisland was to invite ruin. To acknowledge it was to surrender to mystery. And so it remained marked upon maps long after it should have been erased, alive not in geography, but in fear. Was there truly a brotherhood of cartographers guarding a forbidden truth? Or was the truth far stranger, that Frisland itself demanded to be remembered, punishing those who forgot? Whatever the answer, the Venetian's fate left a question hanging like fog upon the sea. And somewhere beyond the horizon, perhaps an island shifted in silence. There are places in the world where the sea itself seems alive, where water and air conspire to erase all certainty. Sailors who braved the far North Atlantic knew this better than anyone. They feared storms, yes, but storms were honest. They came with black clouds and roaring winds, and a man could fight them or surrender. The fog was different. The fog deceived. It swallowed light, silent sound, twisted direction. And it was in the fog that Frisland revealed its most dreadful face. For centuries, ships sailing north told the same tale. Fog so dense it turned day into night. Lanterns burned dull. Compasses spun without reason. And the very sense of time seemed to stretch thin. Captains who trusted their instruments found themselves lost. Crews who thought they knew the sea discovered they were drifting in circles, chasing horizons that no longer existed. It began as a nuisance, an inconvenience to navigation. But then the testimonies grew stranger. The fog was not simply thick air. It was alive. It pressed against sails, clung to the skin, breathed like a living thing. Some swore it listened. Men claimed their whispered fears were answered in the shifting mist. As though the fog itself spoke back, the navigators recorded impossible readings. Compasses turned north, then south, then east in the span of moments, as though the magnetic heart of the world had fractured. Lodestones lost their pull. Metal rang faintly without being struck, vibrating with hidden currents. The stars, when visible, bent subtly. Constellations twisted just enough to unsettle the mind. It was as if the fabric of reality itself bent inside the fog, warped by something unseen. A ship from Portugal returned half its crew short, not because of storm or battle, but because men had walked into fog and never returned. One sailor swore he saw his comrades ahead, stepping into an outline of streets that should not have existed, paved with stones glowing faintly in the gray. When he tried to follow, the fog thickened and they were gone. The ship's captain described the sound of bells ringing deep within the mist. Not one bell, but dozens, tolling as though a great city lay hidden only a breath away. Other voyages echoed the same horror. A crew from France swore they heard marketplaces alive with trade. The chatter of merchants, the clatter of hooves, the laughter of children. Yet no land broke the waves, no city appeared. The sounds came from everywhere and nowhere, carried on winds that should not have existed. The fog swallowed their senses, fed them illusions so real that men wept with longing for a home they had never known. Whispers spread that Frisland was not an island of soil and stone, but a mirage of memory, a city adrift in time, drawing ships to its phantom streets. Some called it a fragment of Atlantis, trapped between worlds. Others swore it was a kingdom of the dead, where souls wander forever in echoes of their former lives. And still others fear it was not city at all, but a trap laid by the sea itself, a lure to draw men away from the living world. The logboats grew more frantic. One English captain described how his men lowered anchor, only to find it resting not on seabed but upon something solid. When they pulled it up, the chain came coated in black dust that shimmered faintly, as though alive. Another wrote that his ship passed through fog so thick that when it cleared, the stars above had changed, constellations unrecognizable. Time itself shifted. He returned believing he had sailed not across distance, but across centuries. And yet, amid these terrifying accounts, there was always the same refrain. Frisland lay ahead, hidden in the fog. For the fog concealed voices, bells, streets. Then surely there must be land. Surely there must be a city. Surely the maps had not lied. But the fog never gave the truth freely. One of the most haunting testimonies came from a single survivor, a sailor whose ship vanished with all hands save him. His words, recorded shakily before his death, spoke not of storms or hunger, but of revelation. His vessel, he said, sailed in the fog so dense the world ceased to exist. For days they drifted blind, hearing only bells, voices, and faint music. Then the mist thinned, and before them stretched the city. It was vast, its streets lined with towers, its windows lit by pale glow. Men and women moved along its avenues. Children ran through its markets. Yet something was wrong. The people did not look at them. They did not speak. They moved in silence, repeating gestures endlessly, as though trapped in performance. The sailors called out, but the city gave no answer. They lowered boats, stepping ashore upon cobblestones damp with mist. And there they saw the truth. The people were not alive. He described faces gray and hollow, eyes that did not blink, mouths that did not breathe. They moved with mechanical rhythm, as though guided by unseen strings. Some clutched baskets without weight. Others pushed carts that left no mark on the ground. When touched, they dissolved into vapor, reforming moments later to continue their endless loops. The city itself seemed to breathe, its towers pulsing faintly, as though it were not built but grown. The sailors panicked, retreating to their boats. Yet as they fled, the fog returned, thicker than before. One by one, they vanished into it, their cries swallowed whole. Only the survivor remained, though he never explained how. His eyes carried the memory of what he had seen, and he spoke only once more before falling silent forever. They are waiting for us. They always have been. Was it madness? The delirium of a sailor lost too long in cold seas? Or was it the most terrifying glimpse yet of Frisland's true nature? A city not dead, not alive, but something between, a place where time fractured, where echoes of humanity lingered like shadows, repeating forever. The survivor's story spread quickly, fueling fear and fascination alike. Some believe he had glimpsed purgatory, a place where souls wandered endlessly. Others claimed he had seen the remnants of a lost civilization, preserved by forces unknown. And still others whispered that Frisland was not city or island at all, but a wound in reality itself, leaking fragments of other worlds into ours. Whatever the truth, the fog remained, Ships that entered it returned changed, if they returned at all. Maps continued to mark Frisland, but fewer dared to seek it, for to sail into the fog was to risk not only one's life, but one's mind, one's soul. The bells, the voices, the streets filled with silent people. These were not illusions a man could forget. They lingered, haunting dreams, pulling the mind back again and again to that gray horizon. And so Frisland endured, hidden in the mist, whispered across the sea, a place both real and unreal, feared and desired, denied and pursued. Its fog remained the ultimate guardian, a veil that no ship could pierce without cost. And behind that veil, perhaps, the city still waits, its hollow inhabitants moving endlessly, awaiting those bold or cursed enough to join them. The survivor's tale ended with silence, but the questions it raised echo still. If the fog hides cities, whose cities are they? If the people are not alive, what are they? And if Frisland is a wound in the world, how deep does it go? One thing is certain, the fog is not empty. It listens, it remembers, and somewhere within it, streets still wait for footsteps, towers still rise unseen, and voices still call across the sea. But if you hear them, if the fog parts and you glimpse the city, pray you do not step ashore, for not all who walk its streets remain among the living. There are islands made of stone, shaped by fire and ice, carved by the patient hand of the sea. And then there are islands that are not made of land at all, but of memory. Frisland, in its most unsettling stories, belonged to the second kind. It was not soil beneath the feet, but recollection beneath the mind. An island that lived only when believed in and died only when forgotten. To those who sought it, it appeared as coast and village. To those who doubted, it remained fog and emptiness. But to those who lingered, it became something else entirely. The earliest accounts speak of sailors stepping ashore to find villages that felt at once alive and abandoned. Doors creaked open, but no hands touched them. Bread sat warm on tables, but no mouths came to eat. Carts rattled down cobblestone lanes, yet no oxen pulled them. And again, the strangest detail appeared. The same moments repeated themselves as if trapped in a loop of time. A woman setting a jug on a step, a child running past, a bell ringing in the distance. The visitors watched the scene unfold, only to see it happen again, exactly the same. Hour by hour, repetition became rhythm, and rhythm became prison. One man described standing in the square as the chapel bell rang noon. The villagers lifted their heads, paused in their tasks, and then went on. When the bell rang again, the scene began from the start. The jug, the child, the same words shouted in the same tone. But there was no real sun above to mark the passage of time. The hour belonged not to the world, but to the island. Time itself was repeating. At sea, men counted their breaths to anchor themselves. On land, they tried to break the cycle. They shouted, sang, clapped hands. The villagers turned their faces, eyes bright as glass, then reset and began again. A stone thrown into the square rolled across cobblestones, but when the bell struck, the stone vanished, and the square returned to its perfect hour. The island did not want new things. It wanted memory, and only memory. For those who stayed too long, the difference between memory and life began to dissolve. A Portuguese sailor claimed he recognized a farmer mending a fence. It was his own grandfather, long dead, young again and whole. A Dutch mapmaker swore he saw his sister in the market, wearing the apron she had been buried in. The island seemed to harvest memories from those who set foot upon it, weaving them into its tapestry of endless repetition. And once a memory took root in Frisland soil, it never released. The farther inland men walked, the stranger it grew. Relics from ages apart stood side by side. A Roman column half buried in grass beside a Norse-ruined stone, a rusted musket lying in the same field as a stone axe. Buildings carried layers of centuries, medieval doorways standing in the same wall as Renaissance windows. It was as though Frisland gathered fragments of forgotten times and stitched them together into a patchwork of history. Not a place that belonged to one era, but a mosaic of many. Fishermen on the coast cast nets into water that rippled unnaturally, their gestures repeated with clockwork precision. Net pull, shake, fold, net, pull, shake, fold. Yet no fish appeared in their catch. The net spilled only seawater, which vanished into the boards before drying. The men nodded as if satisfied, only to cast again. Visitors tried to interrupt, seizing the nets or calling out. For one instant, the fisherman's eyes flickered with something like awareness. Then the bell rang, and the hour began anew. It was called the Island of Echoes because nothing on it was whole. Every face, every gesture, every artifact was an echo of something once real. Survivors swore it drew from their own memories, stealing fragments of their lives and replaying them. A sailor who had lost a brother at sea found that brother alive again, hauling rope in harbor, smiling with lips that moved but made no sound. A captain who had buried a child at home saw the child again, forever chasing a hoop down a lane. The scenes were unbearably beautiful and unbearably cruel, for they were real only in repetition, and to reach for them was to touch smoke. What was Frisland? A land of the dead, replaying their hours forever? A wound in time where the past leaked into the present? Or worse, a parasite that lived by feeding on memory, drawing life from those who believed in it? One expedition described the horror in detail. They camped in a village where every hour reset, the same meal placed upon the same table, the same cat stretching on the same wall. At first, they laughed at the absurdity. Then they grew unsettled. On the third day, one sailor joined the repetition. He carried water from the well, set it on the table, and when the bell rang, he did it again. When the others tried to shake him, he resisted, his hands clawing to hold the bucket. His face was blank, his eyes unblinking, his lips moving in the rhythm of the hour. By nightfall, he was no longer one of them. He belonged to the island. Others resisted longer, but the pull was always there. The bell tolled not for the villagers, but for the newcomers. Each chime pressed upon their minds, telling them to join, to accept, to repeat. A priest muttered prayers to drown it out. A helmsman carved marks into wood to remind himself of the present. A young boy wept silently, clutching his father's coat, certain that if he let go, his father would vanish into the rhythm of Frisland forever. And then came the realization that no one wanted to speak aloud. The island did not want them to leave. When they returned to their ships, they found the tide wrong, flowing in circles that trapped their boats. Anchors caught on the seabed, but could not be pulled free. Compasses spun. Sails hung limp in wind that had not vanished but refused to touch their masts. One man swore he saw the shoreline extend, the water itself reaching outward to keep them near. The survivors described a sensation like invisible hands tugging them backward. Some swore they heard their own names carried on the wind, spoken not by crewmates but by the villagers in the repeating square. The people of memory were calling them to stay, to become part of the hour. The Island of Echoes was not merely a place of memory. It was a prison made of remembrance, a place where leaving meant tear yourself free from your own past, and the island would not allow it easily. One captain swore he saw the truth as his ship strained against the tide. On the shore, in the village, he saw himself standing, raising a hand in farewell. The figure wore his coat, bore his scar, smiled with his smile. It was him, and yet not him, a version of him already claimed by the island. His men dragged him back from the rail before he could leap into the sea. But he died soon after, eyes open, staring not at the world before him but the shore behind, whispering, "I am still there." And so the tales of Frisland grew darker. No longer was it a land to be discovered. No longer even a mirage of fog and storm. It was something older, stranger, more insidious. A place that took the most fragile thing a man owned, his memory, and bent it until it could be worn like clothing. A place that kept echoes forever, binding them to streets and squares, trapping souls in the endless hour of the Island of Echoes. And the most terrifying truth of all, the island did not need to be found. It needed only to be remembered. For once a man carried it in his mind, Frisland had already won. The survivors of those voyages carried the curse for the rest of their lives. They woke from dreams where bells tolled endlessly. They swore they saw loved ones long dead, waiting in doorways. Some went mad, trying to return. Others went silent, too afraid to speak its name, knowing that to give the island words was to give it life again. But the maps never forgot. Frisland remained inked across parchment, its outline repeating through centuries, surviving through memory alone. For what is a map, if not an echo of belief, preserved against erasure time? And so the island of echoes endures, a land not of stone but of memory, built from fragments of forgotten time, villages repeating the same hour forever, fishermen casting nets into seas that never yield, families reunited in moments that never end, beautiful, tragic, impossible, and always waiting for new souls to join them. But what happens when someone tries to leave? That is the final horror. The island does not let go. The bells toll again. The tide pulls wrong. The fog thickens. And the memory of yourself remains behind, waving as you sail away, knowing that you never truly left. Every legend holds a figure that watches, a presence set apart from the rest, neither god nor ghost, but something in between. For Frisland, that figure was known only as a guardian. It was said that no one who set foot upon the island escaped its notice, whether walking in repeating villages, wandering among fields of fractured time, or gazing upon the black towers in the fog. Sooner or later the guardian would come. The stories agree on very little about Frisland, its size, its shape, even its reality. But the guardian, every testimony carried the same conviction. There was something upon the island that walked, not a villager caught in an eternal loop, not a shadow in the fog, but a being that moved freely, aware when all else seemed trapped. It was neither man nor spirit, yet wore the suggestion of both. Some described it as tall, cloaked, faceless. Others swore it had the appearance of an ordinary traveler, indistinguishable from one's own crew until too late. A few claimed it shifted form, appearing as someone familiar, a father, a lost friend, a child. Perhaps the guardian had no true shape at all, only a mask drawn from the minds of those who beheld it. But its power lay not in its appearance. It lay in its questions. Unlike the phantoms that filled Frisland streets, the guardian did not ignore intruders. It sought them out, not with violence, but with words. When approached, silence fell upon the island. The bells stopped ringing. The repeating scenes froze mid-gesture. And even the sea itself seemed to hold its breath. The guardian would come forward and speak a single question. The questions were never the same, yet always impossible. A captain was asked, "What was the first sound you ever heard?" A sailor was asked, "What lies beyond the sky you've never seen?" A priest was asked, "Which sin do you carry that even your God has forgotten?" To those confronted, the questions were unbearable. They were not riddles to be solved, but wounds forced open. Men tried to answer and failed. Some stammered meaningless words. Others wept in silence. A few shouted back in defiance. None who failed remained whole. The curse was subtle, yet devastating. Those who could not answer the guardian's question lost all memory of home. Their names slipped first, then their families, then their very purpose. They could not recall where they were born, or why they had sailed, or what they had once desired. Home became nothing but an emptiness inside them, a hollow echo the island eagerly filled. Such men wander into Frisland's loops and join them, casting nets into empty seas, lifting buckets from wells that never ran dry. Their faces blank, their lives stolen. The survivors told of comrades who vanished before their eyes. One moment a shipmate stood beside them, trembling before the guardian. The next, he turned and walked calmly into the village, his expression vacant. When they tried to stop him, he resisted, speaking in the same words as the villagers. His body was his own, but his soul belonged to Frisland. Were those who answered. The accounts are rare, for few dared. Yet one legend tells of a woman who replied when asked, "What is the one thing you fear will outlive you?" She answered simply, "Silence." The guardian stood still, and then it stepped aside, letting her pass. She returned to her ship shaken but alive, carrying her memory intact. But for the rest of her days, she could not abide silence. She filled her hours with words, song, or noise, for she swore silence was listening. If the guardian was not spirit, not man, then what was it? Some claimed it was a will of the island given form, a living embodiment of Frisland's hunger for memory. Others said it was an ancient watchman, left behind when the island fell into its fractured state, cursed to test every soul that entered. A darker theory whispered that the Guardian was not unique, that there were many, and that each traveler saw only the one meant for them. But the most disturbing accounts were those in which the Guardian did not ask questions at all. In these, it simply stood, watching. One English sailor swore he saw its shadow in him for days, always at a distance, never approaching, its figure visible between trees, atop ridges, or at the far edge of streets. Each time he looked again, it had moved closer, and when he blinked, it was gone. By the time his ship left Frisland, he was half mad, certain the Guardian had followed him into the world beyond. And then there is the diary. It was found washed ashore years after an expedition vanished, waterlogged yet legible, its ink smeared but not erased. It belonged to an English captain whose name was known in London, a man respected for his discipline and reason. His earlier entries described the fog, the strange villages, the endless repetition. But near the end, the tone shifted. His words grew jagged, his sentences broken by fear. He wrote of his men hearing voices that were not theirs. He wrote of scenes repeating even aboard the ship, as though the island had followed them back to sea. And then on the final page, only a single unfinished sentence remained. It stands before me now. The words ended there. No description, no farewell, only silence. The ink trailed downward, as though the pen had slipped from his hand mid-stroke. What did he see? Did the Guardian finally confront him, demanding an answer he could not give? Or did it not need to ask at all? Perhaps it had come only to claim him, to erase his memory of home, to bind him forever to the island. The diary was the only piece that returned. The captain and his crew were never seen again. The Guardian remains one of Frisland's most enduring terrors, for it represents not just the fear of being lost, but the fear of losing oneself. To forget home is to become untethered, to drift without anchor, to dissolve into someone else's memory. And that is what the island craves most. Not flesh, not blood, but memory. The Guardian ensures that memory is surrendered willingly, or stolen when the answers fail. To this day, the stories of the Guardian echo in the North Atlantic. Fishermen claim that when fog gathers too thick, they see a figure upon the waves. Travelers whisper that some questions in their dreams do not belong to them, but to something asking, waiting. And in dusty archives, the diary of the English captain still rests, its final words frozen in time. It stands before me now. The pen fell, the page ended, and what came next has never been written. By the dawn of the 18th century, Frisland had already earned its place among the strangest enigmas of cartography. Scholars debated it, sailors swore by it, skeptics dismissed it. Yet for all the uncertainty, the island's presence lingered like a scar across centuries of charts. Even as new maps grew more precise, even as the Atlantic was surveyed with sharper eyes, Frisland refused to vanish entirely. There was always some trace of it, an outline copied from older records, a shadow in the margins, a name half erased but never forgotten. And then in the archives of a Venetian library, something was discovered, a map unlike any other. It was hidden inside a collection of maritime charts donated by an old family of navigators, a bundle no scholar had touched for nearly a century. At first, it seemed ordinary, a weathered parchment, edges frayed, the North Atlantic spread across its surface. But when candlelight hit the ink at a certain angle, something else appeared. The map was layered. Beneath the visible coastlines and islands, faint lines glimmered, drawn in ink that faded almost invisibility. They formed ghostly shapes across the ocean, like shadows underneath reality. One of them was Frisland, not once, but several times. Each outline shifted, overlapping the others like phases of the moon. To those who studied it, the meaning was unmistakable. Frisland was not fixed. It moved. The discovery electrified the few who dared to believe. The layered chart suggested Frisland did not disappear as skeptics claimed, nor was it swallowed forever by the sea. It drifted. Its position changed from age to age, as though the island slid between locations, or perhaps between times. Each cartographer who drew it may not have been wrong. They had merely seen Frisland, where it was at that particular moment. A detective-like pursuit began. Scholars across Europe scoured archives, comparing maps from different centuries, searching for patterns. And patterns emerged. Frisland never appeared in the same place twice. Sometimes it hovered south of Iceland, sometimes close to Greenland, sometimes deeper into the Atlantic void. Its shape shifted, its size changed, but the shadow remained consistent, as though the island was not an error but a moving presence. The implications were staggering. Was Frisland a landmass adrift, carried by currents unseen? Was it a fragment of earth torn loose in some cataclysm, sliding endlessly across the sea? Or was it something stranger, an island that slipped not only through space, but through time itself? The more they searched, the more impossible the picture became. Some maps placed Frisland in two locations within the same year, as though it had been sighted simultaneously in different seas. Others showed it vanishing entirely, then returning decades later. The layered map hinted at an explanation no one dared to write openly. Frisland was not bound to a world in the same way as other islands. It crossed boundaries men did not yet understand. By the mid-1700s, whispers spread of a secret project. Scholars meeting in hidden chambers, pooling their findings in defiance of kings and patrons. These men and women were less concerned with proving Frisland's existence than with understanding it. They treated it not as a place to be colonized, but as a phenomenon to be studied. And in their pursuit, the legend grew darker. For the more they mapped Frisland, the more it seemed to map them in return. Letters from a hidden society described dreams too vivid to ignore. Members woke with visions of coastlines they had never walked, villages repeating the same hour, black towers rising from fog. Some drew what they saw, only to find their sketches match details from accounts centuries apart. A French astronomer wrote that he awoke with salt on his lips, though he had not left his chamber. A Venetian scholar confessed he could no longer tell whether the maps guided his dreams or his dreams guided the maps. And then there were the disappearances. One researcher vanished from his study in Amsterdam, his chair overturned, his papers scattered. Among them was a sketch of Frisland in yet another position, this time drawn over the coordinates of an empty sea. In Venice, another cartographer collapsed mid-sentence while lecturing on the shifting island. When he recovered, his memory was gone. He could not recall his own name, nor the names of his children. But when given pen and ink, he drew Frisland again and again, each outline different, none aligning with the others. The society dissolved in fear, its members scattering, leaving only fragments of their work behind. Yet the layered map remained, guarded in secrecy, passed between private collections until it surfaced centuries later. By then, science had changed the world. The oceans were charted with precision. Satellites circled the skies, and the mysteries of the past seemed ready to yield to modern certainty. But Frisland did not yield. In the 20th century, the layered map was studied anew, this time with tools undreamed by its original keepers. Its faint inks were enhanced, its coordinates recalculated. When plotted against modern charts, something extraordinary emerged. The shifting positions of Frisland did not form random scatter. They followed a pattern, an arc across the Atlantic like the path of a drifting comet. The theory was radical. Frisland was not gone. It was still moving, not like an iceberg or a ship, but like a phantom sliding through dimensions of sea and time. It appeared when conditions aligned, vanished when they did not, leaving only fragments in the memories of those who glimpsed it. A phantom land, real but unreachable, drifting between realities. Skeptics dismissed it as nonsense, the fantasy of dreamers. Yet not all were unconvinced. Some pressed further. In the age of satellites, nothing escaped the eye in the sky. If Frisland moved, if it cast even the faintest shadow, then perhaps it could be found again. And so the coordinates were entered, the path projected. The data fed into satellites orbiting high above the Earth. The machine scanned the empty waters where no island should be. At first, they returned nothing. Ocean, current, waves, the endless blue of the Atlantic. But then, in one frame, a shape appeared. It was faint, almost too faint to notice. A shadow upon the sea, darker than the water, larger than any ship. It lasted only seconds before vanishing. Yet, when the image was enhanced, Its outline matched one of the old maps exactly. The scientists hesitated to publish. Some feared ridicule, others feared worse. For the shadow was impossible. There was no landmass there, no geological formation to explain it. And yet the satellite had captured something, a presence beneath the waves, as if the island had surfaced for a heartbeat before slipping away again. Frisland was not gone. It was waiting. The discovery raised more questions than answers. If Frisland still drifted, where would it appear next? Could it be reached, or was it forever half removed from the world? And perhaps most chilling of all, if satellites could see it, could it also see us? For centuries, Frisland haunted maps, slipping between ink and imagination. Now, in the age of machines, it haunted data. It was no longer confined to parchment and parchment dreams. It had crossed into modern sight, if only for a moment. And in that moment, the past and the future touched. The shadow remained classified, hidden in archives as secret as those that once guarded the layered map. But rumors spread, as they always do, whispers of an impossible shape captured beneath the waves. A phantom island, not dead, not alive, moving still, waiting to be remembered. And somewhere in a restless sea, perhaps even now, Frisland drifts. The danger of Frisland was never only on the sea. The storms, the fog, the vanishing fleets, these were horrors of the waves. But the greatest terror of all came later, when the maps were studied not with sails and compasses, but with pens and lamps. It was not sailors who suffered, but scholars, not explorers who drowned, but historians who stayed on land and read too deeply. By the 18th century, Frisland had been erased from most official maps. The age of science had no patience for phantom islands. But there were always those who could not forget. They searched old atlases, traced faint coastlines with trembling fingers, and convinced themselves that if the island had been drawn once, it must exist still. They were not adventurers. They were men and women of study, bound to books and archives. Yet slowly, their lives began to unravel, as if they too had set sail for the north. The first signs were small. A Venetian archivist, studying a 16th century chart, awoke in the night with salt on his lips. He lived far from the sea, yet swore he tasted brine as though waves had broken across his face. In London, a historian reported waking to the sound of gulls above her bed, though no birds circled her city. At first, she dismissed it as imagination, but then the gulls came every night, circling unseen. Their cries filled her ears until she could not sleep. Others spoke of whispers, gentle at first, like wind through leaves, but growing sharper with each passing week. The whispers came not from outside, but from within their own homes, curling from the corners of rooms, murmuring from shelves of books. When pressed to recall the words, the scholars faltered. Some said it was a language they could not recognize. Others swore it was their own name, repeated again and again, spoken in a voice not their own. These were not isolated cases. Across Europe, researchers who studied Frisland's maps began to show the same signs. Their colleagues noticed the changes. Distracted eyes, trembling hands, ink-stained pages filled not with argument or analysis, but with drawings of the same coastline repeated endlessly. Some became obsessed with drawing the bell tower, others with the black towers in the fog. One man filled every margin of his manuscripts with sketches of nets cast into empty seas. Another scribbled the same word hundreds of times until the paper tore. Frisland, Frisland, Frisland. The island, it seemed, had found a way to claw back into existence. Not through storms or fleets, but through memory. Every mind that studied it became fertile ground for its return. The more attention it received, the stronger it grew. Like a parasite, it fed on belief, on curiosity, on obsession. And its victims were not rough sailors, but men and women who thought themselves safe behind the walls of libraries. Families began to notice. Husbands who once devoted themselves to work abandoned their households to pore over maps night and day. Wives who had been careful keepers of their homes drifted into silence, staring for hours at old charts spread across tables. Children were left unfed, businesses untended, friendships forgotten. The call of Frisland drowned all else. Some resisted, But the price of resistance was no gentler. A French scholar tried to burn the maps he had collected, convinced the ink itself carried poison. But when the flames consumed the parchment, he screamed as it burned himself, clutching his hands though no fire touched them. Days later, he was found wandering the docks, asking sailors if they would take him north. Others gave in completely. One German historian left his family without farewell, walking to the sea with nothing but a small bag. He was last seen boarding a fishing vessel, muttering that he would find the island no matter the cost. He never returned. His children grew up with the memory of his empty chair at the table, haunted not by the sea that had taken him, but by the silence of his obsession. There were tragedies more subtle, and in many ways more cruel. A young scholar in Paris spent years writing about Frisland, convinced he was close to solving the riddle. His wife tried to distract him, tried to remind him of their children, their home, their life together. But he grew distant, his words always drifting back to the island. One night, she woke to find him gone. His desk was covered in notes. His pen dropped mid-sentence. Only one line was complete. "Frisland is waiting for me. I must go." He was never seen again. His family searched, begged, prayed, but he had vanished as completely as the fleets of old. His absence became another scar, another wound left by the island's hunger. For Frisland did not need to kill with waves or storms. It killed with memory, pulling men and women into its grip until they surrendered everything they loved. The mystery deepened. Was the island conscious, aware of those who studied it? Did it reach across oceans to those who remembered its name, using their minds to anchor itself? Or was it something more insidious, a wound in reality that bled into dreams, drawing anyone foolish enough to press against the bandage of history? Whatever the truth, the price of knowing was always the same: obsession, ruin, disappearance. The more deeply one studied Frisland, the more it studied back. The whispers grew louder, the vision sharper, the compulsion stronger, until one day, the scholar did not wake in his bed, but upon a shore that should not exist, walking streets filled with people who were not alive. In this way, the curse of Frisland spread not by sea, but by thought. It infected maps, then scholars, then families. Each person who gave themselves to the island carried it forward, ensuring its name was never forgotten. And each family broken by its absence left another echo in the world, another grief Frisland could harvest. The question remains, was this the island's design? Was it clawing its way back into existence through memory, using human obsession as its anchor? Or had it always existed this way, a place half-born, half-remembered, feeding on the minds of those who dare to believe? The last words of the Parisian scholar still linger in archives, written in a hand trembling with both fear and certainty. They are words that families refuse to speak aloud, words that echo the fate of countless others who vanished before him. "Frisland is waiting for me. I must go." For centuries, Frisland lingered in the twilight between truth and myth. It appeared on maps, then vanished. It swallowed fleets, haunted sailors, whispered into the minds of scholars. It became a place that lived less in sea than in memory, sustained not by soil or stone, but by belief. Yet belief has power. It shapes legends into gods, myths into nations, stories into destinies. And so the question remains, if Frisland has survived all attempts to erase it, if its name still lingers on lips and in archives, then perhaps it has never vanished at all. Perhaps it waits. The ocean does not hurry. It remembers what humanity forgets. It can wait longer than empires, longer than nations, longer than memory itself. And so perhaps Frisland, that phantom island, waits too. Not gone, not destroyed, but sleeping in the folds of time. Patient as stone beneath the waves, patient as memory within the mind. The legends speak of islands that appear only when the world is ready. Atlantis, High Brazil, Avalon, each one woven into prophecy as much as geography. Frisland belongs to that same haunted lineage. Its shape is less important than its meaning. Perhaps it is not an island of land, but an island of destiny, one that drifts into the world only when conditions align. Not currents of water, but currents of history. Not tides of the sea, but tides of humanity. When men first set sail into the unknown, Frisland appeared. When maps sought to tame the oceans, Frisland persisted. When science declared it gone, it lingered in shadows. It seems to arrive whenever human curiosity grows too restless, whenever the hunger to discover oversteps the caution to remain safe. Perhaps that is its role, to test us, to tempt us, to remind us that knowledge always demands a price. The survivors who swore they had seen it, who walked its echoing streets, who answered the Guardian's questions or failed them, they all told the same story in different words. Frisland was not merely a place. It was a mirror. It showed men what they feared, what they remembered, what they desired most. It reflected them back at themselves, stripping away the illusions of certainty. And what is more dangerous than a truth revealed too soon? If Frisland waits, then it does so not as land but as challenge. A question set before humanity, repeated across centuries. Are you ready to know? And if the answer is no, the island slips away again, retreating in the fog, leaving only echoes. But one day, the answer will be yes. The layered map suggests a pattern, a drifting arc through sea and time. If the pattern holds, then Frisland is due to return, not as a fleeting shadow in the fog, but as land that can be touched, walked, claimed. And when it rises again, what will it bring? Will it offer knowledge, the secrets of its frozen villages, the truth of its black towers, the mysteries of time repeating itself? Or will it demand sacrifice, as it always has, feeding not on blood but on memory, stealing lives not with violence but with silence? Imagine the world when that day comes. Satellites scanning the Atlantic, ships converging, governments declaring rights of ownership. Imagine scholars who spent lifetimes hunting the island finally setting foot upon its shore. Imagine the first report broadcast to billions. We have found it. And then imagine what follows. Will the bells toll once more, trapping the newcomers in endless hours? Will the Guardian step from the fog, asking questions no human can answer? Will the island peel memories from the minds of explorers until they forget who they are, where they came from, why they ever sought it? Frisland has never given freely. It has only taken. Sailors vanished. Scholars broke. Families were left behind in grief. Its gifts were always curses in disguise. Knowledge that costs sanity. Discovery that costs identity. So when it returns, as the maps and shadows suggest it must, what price will humanity pay this time? Perhaps the island is not waiting for ships or scholars. Perhaps it is waiting for us. For all of us. For an era when humanity's hunger for discovery is no longer measured in oceans, but in stars. When we no longer ask, what lies across the sea, but what lies beyond the sky? Perhaps Frisland will appear again not as an island in the Atlantic, but as a reminder that some mysteries are not bound by geography at all. They are bound by destiny, and destiny cannot be erased. In some dusty libraries, in old atlases hidden on forgotten shelves, Frisland still lingers, its outline faint, its name smudged but still there. In those books, maps are not fixed. They breathe, they change, and sometimes, late at night, under lamplight, scholars have sworn they saw a line shift faintly across the page, coastlines bending, oceans stirring, and in the empty space of the North Atlantic, a shadow redrawing itself. At first, faint, then darker, then certain. The lost island rising again, ink spreading like a wound reopening, daring us to look for it once more. And so the story ends not with answers, but with a question. Frisland may not have vanished at all. It may be waiting for us to return, waiting for us to ask too many questions, to push too far, to hunger too deeply for what should remain hidden, waiting for the moment when curiosity outweighs caution, when belief outweighs reason. Waiting for the next era of explorers. When that day comes, the map will redraw itself fully. The bells will toll again. The fog will gather. The Guardian will step forward. And humanity will face once more the island that should not exist. Frisland, the island that waits. Perhaps Frisland is not gone at all. Perhaps even now, it drifts beneath the horizon, patient and unseen, waiting for the moment when we dare to seek it again. Some say islands vanish forever, but others know the truth. Nothing that powerful ever disappears. It lingers in memory, in whispers, in dreams that wake you with salt on your lips. If you have followed this tale, you know by now that some mysteries are not solved, they are lived. They haunt, they echo, they demand to be remembered. Frisland is one such mystery, but it is not the only one. The world is filled with forgotten maps, cursed lands, and stories carved into silence, waiting for those bold enough to listen. So stay with us. Do not let the fog close in. There are more legends ahead, more shadows to follow, more truths hidden in the ruins of time. If this story has left you with wonder, sorrow, or chills you cannot quite explain, then you are exactly where you are meant to be. Like this tale, if it moved you, share it so others may join us in the search, and leave your thoughts below. For every mystery deepens when voices gather to question it. And if you have not yet done so, subscribe now. Join us on this voyage into the unknown, where history and legend blur and every horizon hides a secret. Because somewhere out there, beyond the maps we trust, the island still waits.